first, we go to Alan Adler once again this week to join us to talk about a new Freightliner and what the company is doing to change the driving experience. Alan, thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, hey, good morning, guys. It's really interesting that it's not just one truck, it's several trucks, and it's a lineup, really, of the Freightliner medium-duty trucks. These are not all new, but they are significantly changed, and especially on the interiors. And it made me think, because we've had an opportunity over the last few years to get around to some of these companies like Kenworth, and to some extent, even all the way back to 2019 and 2020 with Mack when they got back into the medium-duty segment. The refinement on these trucks, especially on the interior, is really getting pretty amazing. And what we're finding is that more and more they're going for car-like interiors. That is, brushed metal accents and wood trim and things that you would find more in a Cadillac or a Lincoln maybe, or even an upgraded, medium SUV. Or, quite honestly, a pickup truck. And why are they doing this? Well, for one thing, getting a better ride quality and a better feel in the vehicle is a good way to keep a driver engaged and also giving them a comfier ride. But more importantly, I think what's happening is these are vehicles that the interior of these vehicles resemble what these folks are driving when they're off duty, right? And so it just brings it, home to them that, to these OEMs as they talk to their customers, are saying, look, give us the stuff that these people are used to having.
I think that that's a really good point, Alan, because, just because you are doing a job doesn't necessarily mean that you want to take away the comforts of that job, right? And as you mentioned, a comfier interior makes for a happier driver and hopefully a little bit of longevity in the job that they're doing. We mentioned that this is starting off in the medium duty space, but are we looking at any overhauls to anything that's designed to be heavier duty or for those long haul trucks?
No, actually, we do have some examples of that. And at the same program back in July that Daimler Truck did out here in the Detroit area, they showed the Western Star 57X, which is, again, it's sort of your highline over-the-road truck in terms of, all of the niceties that you would expect. In fact, we wrote at the time that, it was loaded up with goodies, if you will, on the interior. And, that's a truck that honestly goes to the owner-operator and to the small business person mostly. They're not sold in big numbers, but you do have that. You also have the Volvo V&L Longhaul. Those are the two competitors really in that tricked out space. But all the way back to shortly after I joined Freightwaves, we went and we saw a Kenworth W990, which again, driver's truck, but in a little bit different way. A lot more exterior chrome, a lot more look at me kind of stuff than we're talking about today. A lot of what Daimler and Freightliner were able to do with these medium duties, again, not an all new truck, but completely new electrical architecture, that allowed for moving some things around that it would just be, more convenient, truthfully, for both the driver, and because most of these trucks are handled by equipment manufacturers or upfitters or bodybuilders, whichever term you like best, they are much easier to connect now electrically, to get the connections made between, say, the mixer in the back or even the box truck or whatever sort of material equipment is going to be used on that body. So, all around this was done in such a way to, and Mary Offenberg, who was one of the Daimler executives, said, look, she said, we talk to customers all the time, and it really is part of our DNA to talk to them. And if we listen to them, they're telling us, look, cars are changing, trucks should change too.
Alan, it's definitely great to kind of hear how some of that IoT is really entering the truck space as we continue to move forward. With those initial stepped up brand, or I said new line for Freightliner coming out, is there an initial timeline on when these will be released, or is there going to be a limited volume that's going to be coming out? Any details around that?
Yeah, we're looking at production in the third quarter of 2023. So the current the models involved, there's really four of them. There's two M2s, and then there's two SD models, which will continue in production after the launch of these new trucks. These new trucks get are called Plus. That is, M2 106 Plus, and that's the differentiator. So the Plus trucks eventually will take over for everything, but right now and for the foreseeable future, Daimler will make the current models and then ease into those new ones. Eventually, these will disappear, but for right now, that's where we're at, and really that's the pattern, Anthony, in the industry. You build side by side for a while until you get your ramp done and your ramp up done, and you have enough to meet demand. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but it should be obvious that the medium duty segment, really from sort of class 4 all the way to class 7, is growing. Used to account for, even just a few years ago, kind of pre-pandemic, up to maybe 100,000 units a year across the industry. That's close to 130,000 now because of so much freight that's moving, hub and spoke, and from distribution center to final mile and that kind of thing. So we're seeing more of the medium duty trucks than we ever have, really. And so it's a market segment that, and Daimler does lead here with the M2. They're the market leader, but it's a very competitive segment, and it's getting more and more entries all the time.
And then, Alan, of course, something that would be top of mind for consumers of these medium-duty vehicles, looking at cost. Are we talking about an incredibly increased cost now to see the extra bells and whistles, or as they're starting to roll them into kind of their standard offering, keeping the same type of price range?
Well, trucks, Kaylee, don't really get an MSRP like a car does. So we don't really have a starting point. I mean, the person who knows how much to spec a truck for is going to be the dealer. And that's really kind of where it's kept. So there is no sort of base model, if you will. There are base trim levels, like in the case of the Freightliners. You've got Pro, you've got Rugged, and then you have Elite. Well, obviously, your Elite with the wood grain trim and that kind of thing is going to cost more. But I don't have any real insight on the prices themselves. I don't believe they priced them yet. I don't think the order books are open, although they could be. It's possible that they are taking orders, but this is an individual dealer spec thing. And of course, if you're buying a small fleet, say 6 or 10 trucks, you're probably going to do a little better than if you just come in and buy 1 or 2. So pricing's always been a little bit opaque in the trucking space, right? I mean, we know in general what a truck will sell for, but we don't really have a good visibility on that.
And then, Alan, when we're talking about now these kind of upgrades to them, are you looking at the potential for any used models who are maybe already in the market, looking at almost doing like an upgrade package? Like, could they maybe get these add-ons later on if they're already being used?
Well, some of it is structural. I mean, in the sense that, like with the seats, I mean, seats are very expensive in any vehicle, car or truck. And so they're doing, foam changes and contours that are quite honestly resembling the Cascadia you asked me about, heavy duty trucks and improvements and that sort of thing. So there's some carryover from the Cascadia, in terms of how they're handling the seats. But seats aren't the kind of thing that somebody's going to go into the aftermarket and necessarily buy a new one or try to upgrade. It's too integral to the vehicle. So a lot of what's happening here, this is electrical architecture. You're not really going to be able to go in and sort of replicate some of these things. This cleans a lot of things up. I mean, for example, I don't know what you drive, but your speakers for your radio are most likely in the doors. Well, now the speakers are in the doors of the Freightliner Plus models. They used to be elsewhere, and the sound quality was pretty wretched. So customers said, you really got to clean that up. And so that's really a lot of what Daimler's been able to do in the Freightliner Plus is clean up a lot of things, move the window regulators to a more normal, where you'd expect to find them kind of thing. And ultimately, the architecture changes also opened up a lot more space. I mean, you do have a lot of customized switches and so forth on a truck, for instance, for power takeoff, if you're a dump truck, for example. Now a lot of this is set up in such a way that you've got a cleaner look as well as more room to put these switches and that sort of thing.
I mean, I drive a 2019 Ford Escape. Maybe I should look at a box truck instead.
You know what? I don't think I'm in their target demographic with my Audi
With your
TT
Audi?
either.
Do you guys want to talk about nickel? Do we have any time left? Should we talk about the trial?
Oh, man, and we don't have any time today, but I think that we'll have you on Friday for Truck Tech, and maybe we can roll it into that for a full week of updates.
Yeah, actually, the title, the working title this week is called, what is it called? It's called Trialing Times. That's what I'm working on. So yes, I've got a few leftovers from our daily coverage that we'll be using.
Perfect, Alan. Well, I'm excited about that update, and thanks so much for joining us this morning. We'll be sure to check in with you on Friday. Right now, we're going to go over to the wall because we have our first carrier update